So after he made the music, right, and sent it to her, she wanted to use Cash App references that she stole from his Cash App and didn't deliver with compounded interest. So it's very easy to, pinpoint who likes to do reverse and then walk around the community. So in Cash App, it almost looks as if sometimes the person that, pays you, it almost looks like they owe you money, but they were the one to help you. So my mom, a lot of the time, you know, has helped me with Cash App. Then it almost looks like she is having to pay me on the other side. Sometimes back end developers make things almost look differently. Then they have other individuals, especially for guys, sometimes it's women. But many times guys love women, right? So for me, global sensation, right? Women love me. After I dropped the song She Want Me, that went global. Then the girl named Rika Salvador likes to act with different individuals, right? Right? As if after I drop that, they do everything else. So then they interrogate you, right? They act as if they like you. They act as if then you give them a couple payments and help them with their health, that then they don't need to actually help you. So then this compounds, right? So their bad behavior, their worst behavior, their not pure intentions. So pure intentions actually then help in favor of the person. Once they have bad intentions, this then goes against the person, right? And it doesn't help them in their favor, especially with communication. So we could then see the girl, right? But here's the thing, the payments were supposed to be made and delivered while that person was also working. Then the police interfere and obstruct. So the police, that's the state entity that's supposed to be there for people's well-being and their service. So then if the police cause the person to go missing, right? If the police then put a restraining order and say it was of protection, but then it didn't get their money delivered, this restraining order was not protection. So Joshua Elijah Ford doesn't have to describe something that is a illegal offense just because there's not somebody else to speak to. So then when they don't have money, they will be offered an attorney for free. But then if my attorney isn't paying me enough, then he would have to speak for me. But here's the problem. They would have to pay me before they have to not pay me and then have to speak for me. So he would also know that he would be in favor of people's best interest, but then after you are in favor of somebody's best interest, they like to then act with their worst behavior or out of your best interest. That means not in favor. So the girl has an auntie that works with the bank. So, but the police also have people that work with the bank, the state police. So she goes missing on my time and money, but the state police don't send a protection order to then have his time and money back. So before they would actually restrain somebody and call it protection, they would have to be in favor of the person with then financing them for the amount, especially if the person goes missing as well. So then there's many accounts and offenses in the millions of dollars that then the state has to pay. But many times they use financial apps to almost look the other way. Then they don't actually pay the person back. So then the person could then say, hey, that's somebody returning something. and they acted like I had to take care of their health. And then they go into a position, a place that is then not of actual help. So then this person gets to go to different houses and everything is called trafficking, right? But then the money that I already helped would have been in best interest of Joshua Elijah Ford. So once the state and the state police and different states federally then interfere with my finances and or money and or my educational value or my peace, then I have to speak on it in front of my audience. My audience is when I'm online logged in. So then if they interfere my finances while I'm working online, then if I don't have enough money to continue to communicate online, that's an interference to my online presence. Then if I have Verizon, they have to then automatically pay for my phone bill, pay for my internet, pay for my online presence. They have to then compensate him. Then the lawyers have to pay him before they have to say they have to speak for him. And all of this happens in banking, especially if the cops interfere her while with her auntie to pay me. So after I write the song Pay Me, and then it says pay me on Cash App for Josh Ford, once they interfere with this and also use digital interference, so they use many forms of torturous interferences to then try to block his finances, his communication, or even his online appearance. They use noise. They they use real impersonators, real people in the community. This then creates a legal document. This legal document then I have to file, because when they use impersonators and then even amplify content that doesn't have the right reach, so they have amplified content that is then more toxic instead of all of the pieces that were in his best interest and favor. So then they amplified the content that showed that it would not be in favor by saying he owes her money. So then there's a piece of content that's amplified on TikTok, right? That I can even show right here while I'm online. So while I do have internet and I'm online, they amplify a piece of content that then is in favor of being discriminatory. So then they use sexism by them being in favor of the girl on this piece of content, right? Even if it's not true. So then instead of amplifying his other content bigger than the piece of content that says I owe somebody money or somebody in my family or that I'm connected to owes money, that's not true. That's false. So then they have a torturous interference in person and online, trying to discriminate and then reverse what is actually happening. So then they use multiple people. They use one or more people to interfere on his finances by also creating it in real life and impersonators in public that then use audio to interfere. So then the term that says words cannot hurt you indeed can. This is then a practice, right? That they use even in military where they use sound and words. It can cause hypnosis. It can cause also many other things that can then interfere. It can cause psychosis. This then would be them trying to recreate the legalities, right, that he already needs protection against. So then his lawyer is supposed to already, if he also doesn't have one, then multiple free lawyers are supposed to be in his favor. Because if they amplify content that is then sexist, discriminatory, and financial interference for him or his family, that's not true, because they owe him too much money already that it would be going to his house to pay him. So the processing server would be going to the distribution and the corporations to then get him his checks, not to his house for to have him and or other individuals to pay just because they show up with paperwork. They would then have to go, whether it's a real process server or impersonator, or is not even using a process server or an accountant. It's just the corporation legally paying them more than the amount due, especially if there's back pay, or if they have to then ask for advance back pay, which is advancing the amount that they already owe them from the past. So then I have to then legally show different documents on my social media, just in case then I don't have a phone number or the same things, even though after I document it, they're supposed to legally protect me against that, as well as continue to pay me for the places that I worked, the unemployment, as well as the social security that will protect me against certain acts, which are all listed of what I said. It's not then using the word certain and other things after I say etc. and list the entities. Sometimes you could do business that could continue to have you speaking for too long. That's why we use etc. and we list the ones that are also corporate and connected to certain corporations, or we list the select few acts and the accounts that then can then legally be connected to the rest. Then we give the number instead. So we give the number that could then be connected to all of these acts and accounts, and then that's how we can protect us from speaking and our health deteriorating. So then we show this on all social platforms, and we show why and the documentation, because somebody cannot have disobedience against somebody just because they want to see how professional they are, just because they use discrimination or even the content that he has to then discriminate against him. So if somebody's professional, they like to then try to poke holes, which is then all the content or documents that they had to use because somebody didn't pay them for being transparent without documentation, right? You don't have to then not get paid for no documentation to act like then you have to show it. That's false. But then once you show it, that's the money amount, because you don't have to. You don't have to show everything online just because you then get to use the internet, because then they try to incriminate you for using something that you already can publicly, even at the mall. So then if you could even use it at the mall, and then they could use it in community centers or label different things around the place you live, this is all of these accounts. And then we can list all the individuals' names, right? Just because you have people's best interest doesn't then mean they don't have to pay you. They have to pay you because you have their best interest. Which means they don't have to arrest you to have to pay you, or then use weapons, or use policing or state interferences to then act like somebody has to pay you. I then don't have to take a long form description because they want to use a short description, right? So then I don't have to go left or right or pick certain political parties either, just because I'm independent. So then they cannot then interfere on somebody's what legal rights already, because they already have to pay you. Payments do not also take long. It's wired, especially if you show that you are already getting payments wired that month. So if they were able to wire you payments that month, it's easy to do it daily through banking and processing systems, which we already talked about earlier. That's why I'm able to then show documentation and the proof of the compromise, and then all of that proof is able to have easy payments delivered to Joshua Elijah Ford, aka Josh Ford. That's the also known as, which is still professional, The also known as is just a shorter form of the professional name. That's not a pseudonym and is not an anonymous form. Those forms, pseudonyms and anonymous forms, can also still receive payments without the person's name. But when they have it connected to state and federal and international, this is easy to receive payments and pay the person instead of creating havoc and then me having to list the names. So if I'm R&B and I don't say people's names just due to protection, doesn't that mean you legally unprotect Joshua Elijah Ford, or then have him have to say the person's names? That means you would have to then pay him before he lists all the names, because then legal offenses will be taken. You then don't have to act like this person has to go to a courtroom or show up in person just because you can break something, even in the form of banking or things that are unforeseen or unseen. These are all legal accounts and acts that then have to be paid for, because just because if a person doesn't go to college or high school, you cannot then try to incriminate them using state police, Wisconsin State Police and Hawaii State Police, and or somebody's parent or sister to then try to what, incriminate or interrogate. Many people like to then act as if somebody isn't as educated, or then like to act like it may be ghosts or unidentified objects or in different forms, right? Then they use audio. They use that's a form of noise, especially if the person works with sound professionally. Then they like to use different interferences. This could then escalate quickly because they're trying to test your education instead of pay you. This is Mark Zuckerberg not having Facebook payments paid Joshua Elijah Ford from Meta and Instagram, which is Facebook, that they like to use shell companies to then protect their assets and try to then take delayed time. Delayed time then gets me paid faster and on time. So then just because in a community the educational level might then be interfered by people on the outside of the community who have millions. This could be Matthew Cole Hano Hano and constituents with Rico Salvador and Alex Pagan. But if Alex Pagan is state police or security and or which is state police and security. If he then puts a restraining order on me and the girl is then cheating and or then under different medical procedures, even if it's then also people in my family who then are protected but then also interfere, this is illegal against Joshua Elijah Ford. Even if you just act like you're moody, he doesn't then need to go online to protect against all human psychology or even torturous interferences in psychology that interfere in business. Even people who then go on TV, even people who go behind the community, even then people who are different lawyers. So then they send in paperwork for a false case. So then they use this as a form of interference, and they do this to many people around America once they watch certain shows on TV. This is illegal, just even if they then have to speak on it. Then money is having to be paid so he doesn't have to speak. But then having somebody not speak could then be illegal if you have somebody that then uses right or left. So if they use right or left audio to somebody who has health issues, they're then trying to have them be political to act like right or left family then interfere, or they have people that then in the community on the outskirts who redline act as if they're family. this is not true, even if then they use what? Different forms of biologics or biological forms to then act as if this person now has family. They might take different uh, DNA samples, DNA tests, or different forms to act like this person has family. Just because what? They might say they used a handshake. So then they like to act as if a person uses a handshake in the streets, right? They like to act as if people who then say in the streets because they might be professionally not in the streets at the time. So then if I'm just not in my uniform or if I'm not working, I would shake somebody's hand in the streets, which is not me being in the uniform or at workplace. This is then a form of sometimes even business or loyalty and respect in the past. But then people like to act like if somebody shows college, forms of college, they like to act like he might be street if he's not wearing certain clothes, which is then a form of discrimination, especially if he does music that then they label hip hop or rap or street just because that person is then no longer working in a professional building. Then they want to act as if the person's apartment is the professional building. That's not true, even if then they're working or making money. Once you then amplify his house or the building and act like that's the place of work, it only interferes on the residents. But once you do this, then you try to create a class action lawsuit instead of going to the person who actually has a legal battle. Then you're then not doing something in chronological order. You're then going from first to last or last to first, having the group involved once you amplify and then act as if you're creating these interferences and saying, okay, so this is what it looks like in person if an impersonator walks outside. Instead of actually knowing that somebody could know what the offenses are, even the textbook, to then also know what it's like on the outside, especially if they're redlining, which means causing interference on the outside, or even redacting, which causes redlining, redacting, or red acting in your bank account. So many times in business and in law, you have to take a longer what form of vocabulary, jargon, or even terminology to then break down defining definitions which may have multiple definitions. Then people like to interfere and say he or she, which is he usually, Joshua Elijah Ford, is over explaining, or because he's a male, they're gonna say he's mansplaining, man explaining. This is false if you're having to make somebody speak illegally, because somebody doesn't have to do this in their community. If somebody, what, like an Asian girl and or the police, then act as if a community center has a reason to be behind his apartment, or gambling or any of the, this doesn't mean he's against it. Just because they put a community center behind your 10 feet behind your apartment and put everybody in there to try to act like they're smarter than him, because they would then act like he's in college or he's not, because then you have to show documents because your lawyers are taking too slow. So then if the bank shows something that's fraudulent and you catch it, but they're already showing you the fraudulent activity, they're already in the know and supposed to pay you more. So if they're paying you a check that's fraudulent, but they make a commercial about the check that's fraudulent, they automatically by default have to pay you more. and not create a class action lawsuit that also then tries to act like, oh, we heard of that case before. That's not true for Joshua Elijah Ford. That's why he would then list it himself, and people cannot reenact. They cannot reenact or redact or then cause interferences, including different ethnicities who want to act like they're what, causing him to speak, causing his health to deteriorate, or having him to over explain or long form break down definitions and terminology.